gosh, look at the crowd.
Come this way.
Those who spread goodness radiate happiness to everyone around them. Introducing LOLC Finance Credit Cards. Fuel the goodness in you.
Welcome to LMDtv. I'm Ashwini Vethakan. In the last few weeks, in the wake of the People's Protest Movement, which began in April, we've interviewed leading lawyers and policymakers with the hopes of finding out what's in store for the nation in the coming few days and weeks. This week, however, we're turning the spotlight on the here and now with the hopes of getting answers to some of the people's burning questions. From the inside, so to speak. Joining us today is Colombo District MP and former non-cabinet Minister of Economic Reforms and Public Distribution, former State Minister of National Policies and Economic Affairs, and former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Harsha De Silva. Welcome to LMDtv, Harsha. It's good to have you with us, and thank you for accepting our invitation to come on the show.
Thank you for having us on the show.
Now, Harsha, you acknowledged in a recent interview how the people can no longer be fooled by false promises and lies, and how the younger generation views parliamentarians, so much so that you are now being labelled as one of the 225. So why is it that those of you who have a reputation of being clean and capable remain within the tainted party system? For example, in France, 5 years ago, Emmanuel Macron broke ranks with the established parties and formed one of his own after winning the presidential election as an independent candidate. Is there a reason for not taking a cue from this?
It's a little complex than that. We are still, in my view, a traditional political party system that exists in Sri Lanka. Yes, in certain social segments, particularly in the city, things have begun to change, and that change of thinking, I think, is permeating down to other levels and different social groups and professionals, students, working people, trade unions. But having been an MP for the last 12 years, I realized that you need a network. I mean, we have something like 12,000 polling booths in this country. And, you need to be able to reach the household. Used to be, campaigning, canvassing, going to people's homes, giving out small leaflets. But over the years, TV, now, of course, the ubiquitous telephone, social media, all that. So perhaps in a way, the need for that physical infrastructure, the network, may no longer be that necessary, right? Because of technology. But I don't believe that it is still possible for an independent operator, to come outside of the political party system and replicate what maybe you said has happened in certain other countries. So I think still the best way to get this done, what I mean is explain to the population the reality and be able to campaign and win at a democratic election is still within some sort of political party structure, right? I mean, the discussions I have with people, say at the Bailiff on a Friday night in Colombo, is very different to one I may have with people in a far-off remote village of Anuradhapura, let's say, right? So that's why I think perhaps we are moving towards a more utopian state that people would like to see. But as being realistic, I don't think we are there yet.
So what's in store for the people as far as polity is concerned? What is the next step if the head of state resigns or is impeached? What would happen if the incumbent government falls or if the PM resigns? In short, what comes next, and what sort of timeline should we be looking at?
Well, whether people are genuine, I think is the first question, right? I know, and we all know, the world knows that this government, the Rajapaksa brothers, have completely destroyed this nation. And there is no doubt about that. There are no questions that need to be clarified. It is a fact. If you consider the central bank annual report that came out just a couple of days ago and use 360 rupees to the dollar as opposed to 198 they used in that publication, right? Even though it was released on the 30th of April or something like that, they're using 198 without even an explanatory note, which I think they should have. So if you use 360, yes, because of inflation, nominal growth would have been there, and probably the real figure might be slightly different to what I'm just about to say. Having, given all those sort of caveats, the per capita GDP is about $2,100, right? Now, when the Rajapaksas took over the government, it was something like $4,000, right? Now, even if you allow for, like I said, inflation and nominal growth, okay, let's say 2,500, 2,600, say $3,000. I mean, so if that is a measure of a nation's value, its success, given GDP is an annually calculated figure, we have gone back at least, 7 to 12 years, right? So this is just one example. Or take the value of the currency. When the Rajapaksas took over this country, the dollar was trading at 180 rupees to the dollar. Today it is 360 rupees to the dollar, which means 100% devaluation or depreciation of the currency. So how can you argue that after having such or created such a massive catastrophe? I'm not even talking about agriculture. I'm not talking about what has happened to the millions of agriculture-related families. Let's keep that for a moment, right? How can you even argue that in some multi-party establishment that they want to, or multi-party setup, whatever the name they want to call it, that they should still be there and be leading this government? Right? I mean, it's a joke that the president will still be there. 20th Amendment will still be in operation. The Rajapaksas will still be there. And Vimal Veeravansa, Gammampila and Vasudeva and all these people will be back. And there's a new government. How can that be a new government? Right? So what we said is, look, give legitimacy to what the Aragalaya is about. Aragalaya is about Gota go home, Rajapaksa go home essentially. Now we know that you cannot send Gota home like that because Mr. Rajapaksa has been elected by 6.9 million people and he has a de jure mandate to be the president. So how can you take him out? Either you impeach him, right? You change the constitution so that the office of the executive president no longer exists, right? And the indications were at the beginning when people moved out of the government, we want the president's powers to be reduced. We want the 19th Amendment back. We wanted more things to be added, so on and so forth. Now what has happened? These fellows are back in the same fold. So it looks like a sort of a wicked joke on the people, completely dismissing, what the whole country and Sri Lankans around the world have been asking for, right? So we are going to bring the no confidence motion when we meet in Parliament this week, and we will see how many people are genuine.
Now, Harsha, a leading lawyer who has wide experience in both governance and advisory roles, Dr. Aritha Vikramanayake, who was on our show last week, stated that he feels the people feel that all 225 must go, which is a call that many are making, given especially the spread of politically instigated corruption. What would your response be to this?
No, I mean, Aritha is a senior lawyer. I heard somebody sent me that clip and, he uses not so flattering language to refer to the 225. Now, one needs to, then what is the option? Another 225 will come? No. If this 225 goes, some other 225 will come. It can be you, it can be Aritha, it can be somebody else. So there will be 225. Or you want to get rid of 225. You want to get rid of the executive presidency also. So who will run this country? So is it this 225 or is it 225, Now, having in the legislature for my third term, I think it's unfair to paint all 225 with the same brush. It is unfair because there are good people in every political party. And because some people have not contributed, have been corrupt, have misused their power, has not declared their asset liability forms, have employed their kith and kin, their officers, gotten into criminal activity, that doesn't mean everybody is like that. Not all lawyers are the same. Not all doctors are the same. Everybody's different. So I don't agree with Arita that all 225 should be sent home unless he and others have a better solution. So there must be some filtering mechanism. So you got to drain the swamp. I get it, right? But then this is a democracy. That's the other side of this coin. And if you're looking for a representative sample of the population to represent those people in parliament, why is there 225? Why is there not 20 million? Because it was a direct democracy, all 20 million would sit in parliament. This is a representative sample of these people. So there are rich people, there are poor people, there are highly educated people, there are people who have never gone to school, on the two extremes. In the middle, there is the middle class, educated, working hard, making a living, married and couple of kids, doing good things, going to temple or church, want to be good citizens, pays their taxes. So that is the population. It's a bell-shaped curve. So you pick from that. So are you saying, no, remove all the, 2 standard deviations from the mean and one end is completely gone. And you pick 225 MPs from that tail, not the bulk, but the tail. So the tail is well-educated, professional people. So is that a solution? Then is it representing the population of this country? So these are questions that we can discuss and hopefully come up with some workable solution. But I don't agree that all 225 is the same. They're not.
Still on the topic of corruption, would we be right to say that it is costing the nation a guesstimated 10% of GDP? And if so, wouldn't its eradication save us as much as $8 billion a year? And that this would be enough to settle our annual debt repayments without having to restructure debt or borrow more?
See, corruption is a cancer that needs to be completely eliminated. It is quite disgusting that corruption happens from the top to the bottom. And there's corruption, and I will challenge in every field in this country, whether it is, the poor Kunukarya who comes in the Kunu truck and wants to get a $200 to make sure that every week the fellow comes and removes your garbage. From that to the very top, where perhaps stories are that, you pay 10% to some minister to get some project and things like that. In between, right, there's all kinds of people engaging in corrupt activity all the time. I once challenged people at a Sri Lanka Economic Forum summit, before the pandemic, 1,000 people in suit and tie and, sari and skirt and all. I said, get up if you have never paid a bribe to the local council to get something passed. And about maybe 50% of those people got up, other 50% couldn't get up. So when people in society accuse of certain other people of being corrupt, they got to look internally and say, have I done the right thing? Have I, participated in corrupt activity? So you can't clap without 2 hands. So always the taker is highlighted. But what about the giver? And who gives corrupt politicians money? Business people. Business people give corrupt politicians money. Sometimes the same business people would come on TV and say, look, we must eradicate corruption. What kind of BS is that? So in our anti-corruption laws, I remember, I think it was Chandrajaratna who was saying, they have to be expanded to include the giver and the take. So you can't just suddenly be totally corrupt, pay off all kinds of politicians to get all kinds of projects. And then suddenly say, look at this corrupt lot. So anti-corruption laws need to be stronger. They need to be broad. And look, all the cases against corrupt people have been dismissed. I mean, this is a joke. This is an absolute joke. And perhaps the figure that you got, you're referring to the USAID report. I think that came out perhaps about 10 years ago, maybe even longer. I think it was Professor Indraratna who had estimated this figure of 6% of GDP. I don't recall any other study since then. So we probably don't even know how deep the problem is and what the real value. But take, for instance, what is just breaking in Australia about the PPE. Some healthcare company in Australia that got $1 billion contract and apparently connected to some money laundering operation in Sri Lanka also. Look at the purchase of aircraft for Sri Lankan Airlines. It was found in a British investigation that people were bribed in the millions of dollars to purchase aircraft, right? Which you are paying massive leases. Somebody told me up to some $900,000 a month when you can get those apparently now for about $250,000 a month. So what is happening to these things? What about Azad Zubairi, where the central bank paid something like $8.5 million to promote Sri Lanka, right? To create a better image of Sri Lanka in the US Congress and various people. And then he's in jail for 12 years. Why? Because it was not spent on that. It was some $6.5 million was put into his bank account, and from his bank account, where the money went, no one knows, right? Who actually got the money back? So there are many people involved in this. Look at all the Panama Papers. It's not just politicians, business people, influential people. Then, so across the board. So I don't think people should try to say, superior than thou kind of attitude. It's not so. It's not genuine. It's not genuine. I mean, how many people pay their taxes, real taxes? Ask that question. How many doctors actually collect money in cash? How many lawyers collect money in cash? Ask these questions. How many tuition masters collect money in cash? They're teaching kids about being good citizens. So, Ashwini, this is a societal problem. As a society, we need to be able to deal with this, and we have to be genuine and honest about it.
And on that note, we'll be going in for a short break.
You love the feeling of being renewed. To stay beautiful every single day. To breathe just like we do, because you are truly delicate. Protecting the ones who've been with us through the years. With Sayalac Care, the only wood coating that truly protects you. Sayalac Wood Coatings from Jat.
Welcome back as we continue our conversation with the Colombo District MP, Dr. Harsha De Silva. Now, you and many others in and out of politics have discussed the economic crisis in recent weeks. But could you tell us how the nation can come out of the immediate crisis? Where bare essentials are in short supply, the power cuts continue, the rupee continues to freefall, and poorer segments of society are now living a hand-to-mouth existence. So while we have been told that the IMF staff-level agreement is likely to be reached within 2 months, where do we find the bridging finance from?
I have spoken inside and outside of Parliament. I have. I saw this coming. I saw this coming since mid-2020. I said it in so many ways. I spoke in English, I spoke in Sinhalese, I spoke inside Parliament, I spoke outside Parliament. I went to TV debates, I gave newspaper interviews. You never asked me for my view. LMD never interviewed me for the two years. You never asked me for my views, right? You never did. I'm being honest here, don't cut this part out. But many others did. And I said, but no one listened. No one listened. I may have been the first, I was the first in Parliament to urge them to go to the IMF. Right? Others were not willing to perhaps say it out loud because people thought at that time, if you said it and if you're wrong, there will be some stigma attached to it. 6 months later, Ranil Wickremesinghe, former Prime Minister, came on the national list. because recall UNP didn't fill the slot for 6 months. And then after that, he also started speaking about it. So therefore, there is a pathway out of this, right? I mean, there are 5 things that need to happen immediately. Bridging finance, ensuring the banking system is stable, stabilizing the macroeconomy, that is debt restructure, fiscal and monetary policy. Then making sure there's a social safety net so that the poor people who are getting hammered left, right, and center, they are cushioned in some way. And 5, going in for medium to long term, massive economic restructuring, reform, where we integrate this country with the world, break down the walls, build the bridges, reform the education system, create the kind of human resources that are necessary and so on. So that is the plan, right? And I don't think these people can do it. They cannot do it, right? We need new set of people to do it.
So what is your take on asset declaration becoming mandatory for MPs, and why is it that only a dozen or so sitting MPs, including yourself, have declared their assets to the public? Shouldn't the parties bear responsibility for this?
Well, I mean, this is it has to be a wider, broader question. There is a law, and that law says not just MPs, senior officials, people who are involved in public contracts, all these people should declare their assets. And I don't know how many of them actually do it. But we have seen previously, somebody took an MP to court. I don't know whether it was Transparency International or someone did, and said, look, this fellow hasn't declared his assets for 10 years. And the court found him guilty of not having done that. And I think the court fined him 200 rupees. So therefore, that is the disincentive of not doing so. And current law doesn't force the person who has access to these documents to release it to the public upon a right to information request. So unless you voluntarily disclose your asset declaration, then it is not available to the public.
Responding to a right to information application filed by the media last year, Parliament refused to disclose the educational qualifications of ministers and parliamentarians on the basis that it would be an invasion of privacy. Given the demonstrations we are seeing today, it is apparent that the younger generation in particular is against this, because in their eyes, they believe a lack of education is one of the main contributors to the nation's plight. As an academic yourself, how would you comment on this?
See, I go back to the answer that I gave you at the beginning of this interview, that I don't believe that certain people should be excluded because of various conditions that are put on people. Because if it is a representation of the population, then any farmer or low-skilled person who belongs to a low-income family should also have the equal opportunity to become an MP. So what I'm saying perhaps may not go down well with some of your viewers. But this is a democracy. This is a democracy. So in that democracy, everybody is equal. You don't have to be highly educated to be able to make the right decisions. There are people, being heads of states, not just here, but elsewhere as well, who may not have had a very high quality education or level of education. But look at how many well-educated people are corrupt. Look at how many of these fellows there are allegations against are educated. They may have degrees, they may have CIMA, they may be engineers. So the biggest issue is corruption. No, that is perhaps the biggest issue that we have. But that education, being well educated, is directly related to less corruption. I haven't seen the data. I haven't seen the evidence. If you can have good people, who are knowledgeable, capable, but decent people, honest people, people who haven't committed crimes, those can represent the people. The country needs to be run by professionals, the civil service. They are the qualified folk who run ministries, agencies, research houses, the board of investment, the port, not the minister, not the MP. Their job is to represent the people, bring people's issues to the legislature, make laws that are fair and equitable across the board. The decision on whether to buy an aircraft or lease an aircraft should not be the job of the politician. To fix the price on fuel, whether petrol should be 338 or 254, should not be the job of the politician. It is a job of the professional who understands and makes a decision based on evidence. The problem is that the politician is actually has become the implementer. That is not the job of the politician. In this country, the civil service has been completely destroyed.
Now, the SJB has stated that it won't be part of a caretaker government unless the President and Prime Minister resigns. So what happens if they don't? How can the country continue like this in the next few weeks?
Look, the people are asking for this. And I told you early on in this interview that it's a utopian situation where constitutionally the president cannot be forced to resign unless you impeach him or the office of the president is abolished. So what we have suggested, Ashwini, is the 21st Amendment. Now, in this 21st Amendment, it is very clear the office of the president gets abolished at some point in time. It's a two-step process. Step one is to get two-thirds majority in parliament. Step two, very likely a referendum, which will have to be put to the people, right? And given that there is about maybe close to 80% of what I just mentioned earlier, that social indicator poll, agreeing with the abolition of the executive presidency, there is a very good opportunity here to finally get it done. So if there is movement to get the first step done in parliament, get the two-thirds, then there is some pathway to finding some sort of resolution. But if the Rajapaksas are saying, no, yes, we ruined this country, yes, we ruined the futures of your children, but we are the Rajapaksas, we will not go. We own this nation kind of business. Then do you expect us to go and, say, look, Maharaja, let us also work with you? What can we do? What can we possibly do? So if they are genuine, my first answer was genuineness. To your first question, my first answer was genuineness. If these people are genuine, then they would be willing to find some way out of this. But I don't think they're genuine. So unfortunately, that's where we are. I mean, we don't want this nation to fail. We don't want this nation to fall any further. We don't want our people to suffer any more than they have suffered because of the stupid policies of the Rajapaksas. But for us to deliver, there has to be some platform. You can't tie my feet and throw me into the deep end and ask me to swim. How can I do that? I will sink and die. So I want people who watch your program, to appreciate the ground situation. Let us push for the 21st Amendment to the Constitution. Let us push for finally, at least to remove this office of the executive president. And let us push to bring more acceptable people, honest and decent people into parliament. Let us push to re-establish the Ceylon civil service, where the secretaries and officials are no longer puppets or slaves of the politicians. Let us push for greater transparency for both corporate sector and public sector and politicians to be more transparent about their financial dealings. Let us push for a better group of people to run this country so that we can give our children back their future.
Well, from asset declaration to new governments, I believe we've all learned more about the truths inside. Thank you for joining us on the show this evening, Harsha.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And that's all the time we have for you this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching and stay safe.